Hey guys, it's Vandy as by our Card Fight Vanguard deck profiles. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Sorry. This time we are covering another deck from DC set 11, with it being Leo Dragonis. So Leo got an upgrade in the previous set and a deck profile on that one, but she also got a nice support card in this set as well, and it kind of changes how the deck plays a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and showcase this deck. Now, for all of you wondering, no, I do not play the Nebula Knight order. The reason why I don't is because my decks are made specifically for English releases, for when the decks do eventually come out in English, even though I'm making them during the time that the Japanese set releases. Also, importantly, I wouldn't run the card anyways because I'm an archetypal player, so I like to play within archetypes, and Nebula Order is obviously within the Nebula Knight. But even more importantly than that, the Nebula Knight Order does not come out in English before set 11, and we only just got recent confirmation that the promo will come out in English in set 12. So there are multiple reasons why I'm not running the Nebula Knight Order, so no one please comment it in the comments. So look at the star shot we instead we have. First today we have our energy generator. It's our ride deck crest. You remember deck is in your ride deck. Auto ride deck. When you ride, place card to your crest zone. If you went second, energy charge 3. Continuous, so you may have up to 10 energy. Auto begin your ride phase, energy charge 3. Then act once per turn, energy by 7, draw a card. On pretty solid, you get a free 3 energy every turn. If you went second, you get an extra 3 on top of that. And then once you have 7 or more, you can blast it to draw a card. You may run into the situations in the deck where you do have the 7 energy to draw, because there are cards in the deck that do inherently energy charge. However, most time you will never use an energy by 7 to draw a card because Leo Dragonis herself requires 4 energy for the skill. However, that 4 energy typically translates into a triple drive, so not really losing out much on that draw skill. So solid card to have here. Moving on to our starter, we have the player of the Oliphant Belnista. Grade Zone boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto roll for second draw card. Standard starter, nothing to specify, but it's just a free draw if you go second. You make this any starter you want, none of the rider that requires Belnista. I choose to make it Belnista though because it's the canonical starter for Liael. Moving on to our Overtrigger, we have our Light Dragon Deity of Honors, Noah. Grade Zone boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Overtrigger, you remove Overtrigger in your deck, and reveal it as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one means, give plus 1 million for the turn. If it building during drive check, activate the dish effect, which until end of turn you can also perform drive checks for the battle as your rear guard attack. That's pretty cool because Leo Dragonis has the ability basically to superior call rear guards and get you consistently twin drive if you sack this during the turn, or if you're playing on the divine skill turn, I think that translates to 7 or 8 drive checks. I haven't done the math in a hot minute, but it's somewhere around there. However, the preferred overtrigger for this deck is Volnok for consistent multi-attacking, or Isfario for consistent crit pressure and also recycling cards from the drops them back into your hand. However, I prefer Armortino in this deck because I like to run the nation overtriggers. I don't really like running the Crit Elemental overtriggers unless I'm using my personal builds or I'm doing something very specific. So one of Armortino, that's the overtrigger for this build. On to our normal triggers, we have our front trigger and 3 copies of Bard of Heavenly Song Alpak. Grade Zone boost, 50k shield, 4k power. Front trigger to use guard circle. If your opponent's Vanguard's at grade 3 or greater, add 5,000 to her shield. She's a 20k shield, which is really nice to have, and she ends up giving the front row plus 10k when you drive check her. And when you're playing a deck that consistently get 4 attacks to possibly even 5 attacks a turn, being able to get extra numbers to the front row during the drive check is a pretty good card to have. So 3 of. And then we have total of 8 crit for Chevalmia. Grade Zone boost, 50k shield, 5k power. You make this any crit you want. I chose to make it Chevalmia because it was the critical for Rizael, and that technically feels like it should be shared with Liael, so there you go. And then we have 4 Blade Feather Dragon. Grade Zone boost, 50k shield, 4k power. Critical trigger, auto rear guard, but then it boosts it, shovel the soul, choose new to K for the turn. This deck can run into a soul problem, so being able to send the critical trigger to soul isn't a bad thing. Now, if you feel bad about the soul problem, you can also change out Alpak for the Divine Sister front. I think her name is Natalie or something like that, where she can send herself to soul when used for guard power. The only issue is with that front, it has 0 power and it doesn't have the extra 5k shield skill, it only has a 15k shield. So I prefer Alpak for the shield value, but if you feel like you're going to run into a soul problem, you can run Natalie as the front trigger instead. But again, I do recommend a crit release for the main Blade Feather to guarantee you won't run into a soul problem. As for our heal trigger, run Bringer of Distant Sounds Aranus. Grade Zone boost, 50k shield, 5k power. You can make this any heal trigger you want. You can do make it the counter heals. I prefer a normal vanilla heal though because it has a consistent 15k shield over the fluctuating 10 to 25k shield, which could definitely screw you over in very specific game situations. As for our normal units, moving on to our grade 1s, we have 3 copies of Grogon. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rear guard circle. If your unit was placed by the ability of your Vanguard with Divine Skill this turn, this unit gets auto rear guard at the end by the boosted, retire this unit and countercharge 1, and it also gets 5,000 power. So pretty solid since it contains the ability. That means it adds it without having to proc off at the time when it boosts. So say for example, you use Leo Dragonis' skill to superior call after you already boosted Grogon, even though the ability would then trigger anyways, still would be a 13k booster automatically compared to just having to initiate the boost from the skill. Not to mention the fact that it gets it when anything is placed by the unit with the Divine Skill, meaning if you did a Leo Dragonis' Divine Skill to superior ride because maybe you don't have CB to superior call stuff, it'll still proc off the 13k skill, and being able to retire yourself to countercharge 1 is good because Leo can also bind from drop zone, meaning it can recycle itself from deck as well while also getting you back CB. So Grogon, very solid grade 1 to have in the deck. I love this card a lot. It's a simple 3F for me. Then we have Swordsman of Twin states Ishtar, Great One boost 5k shield, 8k base, auto back or rear guard circle. When your rear guard in the same column as Zune is bound by the ability of your grade 3 Greater Vanguard of Leo in the card name stand itself, which is super cool because that means you can get a consistent booster in a multi-attack deck. And the issues with a lot of multi-attack decks is that if you don't have a consistent booster behind it, one of the attacks will end up being weaker than the other ones. But with Ishtar, you get a free consistent booster, so there you go. You can technically take this card down to 2 or 3 copies depending on your personal build to increase other cards for either consistency reasons or for brute force numbers. I choose to have it as a 4 though, just to consistently see it, because anything less than 4, for some reason I proceed not to draw each tier the entire game. So I'd rather have like 1 or 2 dead copies and actually be able to play the card rather than have just 3 dead slots in my deck. Then we have 4 copies of Knight of the Distant Bolt Almov, who has an amazing English quality art. Thank you, Instagram. Great on boost 5k shield, 8k base, all placed on rear guard circle. Choose a grade 3 card, Leo in its card for your ride deck, and you may reveal it. If you revealed a card or your Vanguard's already a grade 3 grade to Leo, energy charge 1. So this is amazing that it can be pulled off on both your grade 1 turn and your grade 2 turn, so before you get to grade 3, but you can also pull it when you're on Leo and it's a free energy charge. So your energy generator gets you 3 energy every turn, but that means you're gonna have to save an energy at least once for Leo Dragonis' skill, who costs energy bots 4. Well, Almov, the turn she's plays automatically makes it so that you can use Leo Dragonis' skill that turn without having to save up extra energy, because you get a 3 every turn plus Almov's normal 1. Then auto rear guard, I think about that she boosted. If your Vanguards are grade 3 or greater Leo and your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater, you can put her to soul and you, the player, get all your front rear guards get 5,000 power for the turn. So that's pretty cool. It gives you, the player, the ability, so if your Vanguard does get superior ridden for a divine skill, you're not going to lose that 5k because they went to the player themselves and not the unit. And giving your rear guards 5k, while it would be better to at least give the entire front row 5k, it's still pretty solid because, again, Leo Dragonis will initiate multi-attacking, so you can boost with Almov during the first attack, and then Leo Dragonis swing, bind the thing in front of Almov, and a superior call, and your front row from then on will always have that 5k. So 4 of Almov. Really good for getting resources in terms of energy, but also soul as well, while also putting additional pressure on your opponent with extra 5k to the front row rear guards, which does stack if you happen to have 2 or 3 Almovs in the back row. As for our PGs, we're on 4 copies of Bringer of Protection Keflon. Great on boost 0, so 6k base, continuous sentinel for 4 sentinels in deck, and auto when it's put on guard circle. Choose units, it cannot be hit in battle. Every hand is true more cards, choose a card from your hand and discard it. Standard PG, nothing too special about it, but that means if this is one of cards in your hand placed on guard circle, you don't have discard, which is great, because that means you be super aggressive in the early game. Spam Almov, spam Ishtar / whatever you choose to put here, spam Grogon, and then when your opponent does eventually counterattack you for being low on hand cards, throw it on the PG, give them a middle finger, you're good to go. Alright, very solid PG to have. You can make this either Paladin named Zero Dragon, or you could make it Aegis Master Dragon, because they have the exact same skill as Keflon. I chose to make it Keflon though, because it came out close to the time of Leo Dragonis' release. Also, apparently it's the cheaper version of all 3 of those PGs. I figured out when I was building my Esso deck in real life. And then we have our last grade 1 of the deck, one of them in the right deck and the main deck of Player of the Lovely Harp Adorphus. So grade 1 boost 5k shield, 8k base, auto and wrote upon by Player of the Beautiful Court Elgenia. Soul boss 1, draw 2 cards and choose up to 1 normal unit from your hand, discard it. If you did not discard a normal unit, choose 2 cards from your hand, discard them instead. All around pretty solid because she fills up your drop zone for your specific grade 2 Elgenia skill to bot some deck stuff back, but also she allows you to draw 2 cards and only replace with a simple discard. And unfortunately, if you're in a situation where you don't have a good normal unit to discard because maybe your only options are a PG or a Persona ride, or those are your only 2 options, well, maybe you just choose to discard 2 cards instead, or maybe you do just choose to discard the normal unit because you can recycle it back via Elgenia skill, so there's a chance you could see it again. Though I have never done that because I'd rather discard 2 triggers, especially if I know I'm going to need that PG, because a lot of the times I don't trust my deck to give me that PG back, considering one very specific YouTube video. So one of Adorphus, very solid card to have in the ride deck. You don't need in the main deck because it has no rear guard skill. Grade 2 wise, we have 2 copies of Sequence Wizard. Grade 2 is a 5k shield, 10k base, auto place on rear guard circle during your main phase. If your Vanguards are grade 3 or grade Leo, CB1, check the top 5, choose 1 grade 3 or less unit card from among them, called rear guard circle, shuffle the deck. So it's a rear guard to the board for a simple CB, not bad, because again, Grogon can counter charge, which is pretty solid. And for the record, anything that ends up in bind zone, you can put back into your deck via the existence of OG Leo Morta, so don't worry about CB problems. You can work with it as long as you have at least 1 Grogon. And then auto rear guard when your other unit is bound by your Vanguard's ability at all, either during the main phase, battle phase, whatever, so it does help out with Leo Dragonis' bind skill. Sequence Wizard gets plus 5,000 for the turn, then you may soul charge 1. Not a mandatory soul charge, so if you're afraid of decking out or seeing a trigger that you would have drove check otherwise, / damage check, you don't have to soul charge if you don't want to, but it's an option there in case you need it for the next card we're going to go over, who does cost a lot of soul with this deck. Not to mention the fact that it's a plus 5k every single time something is bound. If you do it during Divine Skill turn of Leo Dragonis, that's a plus 15k right there. And again, superior call from the top 5 makes it a very solid grade 2 to have. We don't need more than 2 copies of it because thanks to cards like Adorphus, we can draw it out pretty easily, and the deck already has enough deck thinning as is to where I feel like we don't need to have more than 2. Next up, we have 4 copies of Knight of Bright Blade Religial. Grade 2 is a 5k shield, 10k base. So it was already assumed that we were going to run Gabrielius and Liael because, you know, anime-wise, Erica, aka Future Hikari, end up fusing with Gabrielius. So by anime logic, she would use Gabrielius in her deck anyways, and then Bushy later confirmed that by basically making Gabrielius solely work with Liael specifically because there's a shared archetypal card between them that only works with those two. So there you go. Anyways, great chance of 5k shield, 10k base, auto place on rearguard circle. If your vanguards are grade 3 grade Liael, Soul Boss 1 check the top 7, show up to 1 grade 3 grade card of Liael in the card name from among them, or up to 1 Blessed Dragon Gabrielius from among them, revealed per to hand and shuffle your deck. So either get your really good grade 3 rearguard or get a Persona Ride / a perfect guard. Cool. Then continues rearguard circle during your turn. If your vanguards are grade 3 grade Liael, she gets 5,000 power regardless of what grade the opponent's vanguard's at. And then again, regardless of what grade the opponent's vanguard's at, if you have a Blessed Dragon Gabrielius on either your rearguard or in your bind zone, she'll get an extra 10,000 power instead of 5,000 power. So cool. She'll either be a 15k base once you're on a Liael, or if you have Gabrielius Summer present, she'll be a 20k. Very solid, and it's really good that none of this ability requires the opponent to be at grade 3. Even better, that top 7 search doesn't require her to be placed during the main phase or from hand, so you can superior call her during the battle phase via Leo Dragonis, get deck thinning during your battle phase, and even be able to add a PG to your hand also during your battle phase for a simple Soul Blast. Yes, she eats into the soul, but that's what Sequence Wizard here is for, and same with Almov, so very solid grade 2 to have. Add your important pieces to your hand, basically adding the entire grade 3 lineup to your hand essentially, and being just a very solid beat stick by being at grade 3 and having one very specific grade 3 rear guard / in your bind zone, so 4 of. Then we have our newest grade 2 in the deck, and our last grade 2 in the main deck, and that is Knight of Severance Cellivant. Grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base. You always know when it's an important card if you can see like parts of Keter Sanctuary in the background. Like for example, Sequence Wizard, you can't see anything of Keter Sanctuary in the background. Adorphus, you kind of can. Keflon, you really can't. But then, you know, Religio, you can see her like walking away from like the steps of a sanctuary, like in the middle of like a small battleground. And then Cellivant, well, you can see the background behind her very clearly. So anyways, auto when bound by the ability of your Vanguard of Liael in the card name during your turn. From anywhere, from hand, from drop zone, from rear guard, wherever. Soul Boss 1, call her back a rearguard circle at the end of the turn, bind her, so she'll go back into your bind zone. That way you can use her for Liael Immortal on your opponent's next turn, which is very good, so you can use her offensively and defensively. All for 1 Soul Blast, which I've heard people complain about the whole Soul Blast thing, but I have like never ran into a Soul Blast problem with this deck, which is making me question a lot, because I can get away with the whole, I don't have a CB problem because I spent a whole year playing CB only as my cost. A whole story behind that I will eventually make a video about. Who knows when, but I'll eventually make a video about it. But I would assume Soul Blast I would have a problem with, but for some reason in this deck I don't seem to have the problem with the Soul Blasting. And then continues rear guard. If your Vanguards are grade 3 grade Liael, she gains boost, so she's a booster as well. The thing with the Soul Blast skill is that if you do bind her during the main phase and call her back out, you can just immediately move her to the front row. I didn't do that on camera yet because we didn't record the match, but the last time I played this deck I did that, where I bound her during the main phase via Leo Dragonis' skill, and then immediately called her back, and then proceeded to then move her to the front row, and then just did the play I just described, where I attack with her, then bind her during the battle phase, and superior call her right back, which is really cool that you can bind her from drop zone and pull all that combo off. All around, very solid grade 2. She does eat into the soul, but on the bright side, her ability isn't once per turn. You can constantly call her back to remake a board and use for Leo's cost, and she's a booster, so you can call her during the back row during the battle phase, still be a booster, so very solid 4 of. And then we have our last grade 2 in the deck, one of in the red deck and in the main deck of Player of the Beautiful Court Alginia. Grade 2 set 5k shield, 10k base, auto and wrote upon by a grade 3 card of Liael in the card name. Choose any number of normies from the drop zone and bot deck them. Then if you chose 3 or more cards, you draw a card. So for the record, you don't have to send the cards to bottom physically to get the skill. Why I'm specifying that is because sometimes you won't have more than 3 in the drop zone. More likely than not, for me personally, I'll have maybe like Gabrielius, I'll have Savorent, or literally any one of my grade 2s, and then I'll typically have the Soul Blasted card from Ordorphus' skill, aka Banista. So I have exactly 3 normal units, but I don't have 3 cards that can go to bottom, because as if any of you know, any card that was originally in your ride deck, when it be returned to your deck, is returned to your ride deck instead of the main deck. However, because this involves you picking 3 normal units and you don't have to physically send them to bottom, I mean, it still sends them to bottom anyways, but because you don't have to physically send them to bottom, you'll still get the draw even if one of your targets is Banista. So very solid grade 2 there, who pretty much gets you a guaranteed draw most of the time, unless you break and see only triggers. The chances of that happening are incredibly slim. It's possible, it almost happened to me once, but or more often than not, you're going to be sending normies back, and if it's like crappy targets targets like PGs and grade 3s. As for our grade 3s, 3 copies of Fated One of Time, Liael Amota, grade 3 to 9% 13k base, Auto and Vanguard when she attacks CB1, choose every rear guard's bind to search after 1 copy of that rear guard and call to rear guard circle, shuffle the deck. So pretty much initial liability attacking, then auto and put on guard circle, discard a card from your hand and put 2 cards from your binds on the bottom deck in any order. Choose whatever you use with Fated One in the card name and it cannot be hits in battle. So if you're on either Leo Amota or Leo Dragonis, she's a free PG, but not specifically a Sentinel. So cards that say your opponent cannot call Sentinels to guard circle, she bypasses. Not to mention that she puts your cards in your bind zone back into your deck. That way you can superior call them back out via Draconis. So then if you're bound Gabwellies, you can go back for next turn. Save when you go back for next turn, especially if you already have a copy of that unit on the rear guard circle. That way you already have an inherent bind target. And then finally, the Divine Skill Auto Vanguard at the end of the attack. If your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater, choose a card with the same card name as her from the drop zone, and you may ride it as stand. If you roll, this unit loses 1 drive for the turn. More likely than not, you will never use any of that skill Leo Morta outside of the free PG skill, because, well, Dragonis you will always be on the Vanguard circle for, and her skill is a better version of the first skill, and her Divine Skill is a better version of the other Divine Skill. However, there are times in very specific niche situations where you will ride from Dragonis to OG Leo, aka the times where you need to Divine Skill and you don't have another Leo Dragonis in your drop zone / soul, so you have to ride Leo Morta just for the kill. But there you go. Most times though, you will only ever use her for her PG skill, which again is a very solid ability, being able to recycle units back into your deck while also being able to protect any Fated One from being attacked hit. Not to mention the fact, because again, she is not a Sentinel, she's not screwed over by your opponent, cannot call Sentinels from hand to guard circle if you Blagdemire. So very solid 3 have to have in the deck. You don't really need more than 3 because cards like Religio can search her. Then we have 4 copies of the Blessed Dragon Gabwellius, grade 3 to 13k base, auto when placed on rear guard circle, slow boss 1 to check the top card, either put it to the top or bottom. If you put it to the bottom of your deck, he gets 5,000 power for the turn. If you kept it on top, it's probably a trigger or PG or something like that. And then auto rear guard when he attacks anything. If your damage zone has 4 more cards until end of battle, this unit gets 5,000 power. Then if this unit was placed on rear guard circle by the ability of your Vanguard Fated One is card name during this turn, and you no drive checks were performed for the battle your rear guard attack this turn, CB1 he'll get 10k instead of 5k, and he'll also lose a drive check, but in exchange he'll be able to perform drive checks. So rear guard drive checks is great, especially with Leo Dragonis over here, which means you're getting a total of 4 drive checks in a turn, which is pretty cool. And again, with how Leo Dragonis' work, where you'll be able to call Gabwellius during the battle phase, right after you bind your deck and shuffle for him, that basically means you can use Gabwellius to try to deck stack for you, so you can try to guarantee your trigger checks. Very solid, great thing to have in the deck. Deck stacks for you for only a simple Soul Blast, not to mention the fact that on swing he's just an inherent 18k once you have 4 more damage, but if that same turn he was placed by Leo's ability, he'll be a 23k, possibly 28k, depending on what other abilities you have active, and also boosters and persona rides and stuff like that, and he'll also be able to perform drive checks. Very solid, great thing to have in the deck, and if you do end up hitting your Armachinoa right before you end up swinging with Gabwellius, well, now you got rear guard drive checks, you don't have to pay the CB cost for his skill, meaning he'll just have a twin drive instead of the single drive. So very solid, great for you to have 4 of. And as for our last grade 3 in the deck, Fated One of Sacred Time, Leo Dragonis, I'll say the fact, I like the deck, I don't like the character. Grade 3, Twin Drive Persona, 13k base, act, Vanguard Circle, once per turn, Energy Blast 4, bind a normal unit from your rear guard or from your drop zone, choose a card from your hand, discard it, and she gets a drive for the turn. You play 4 energy, and then you bind a normal unit or from rear guard or drop zone, so you know, Sullivan call target right there. It's cool that it can go from drop zone too, so it doesn't have to be specifically from rear guard. I do question why it has to be a hand card discard. I mean, I don't question it, I just feel like it sucks that you have to discard a hand card, but I mean, she gets a drive to replace it, so it's not all bad. The best part is that a part is not a part of the cost, meaning as we've seen in the anime every single time during Erica's final turns, if you call your entire hand and then use the skill, because you have nothing in your hand, you don't have to discard, but she'll still get the drive. And then anyways, auto Vanguard when she attacks anything, the upgraded version of this skill, CB1, choose one of your rear guards, bind it, and instead of searching for specifically that card that was bound, you search your deck for up to 1 card with the same card name as any card in your bind zone. So say for example you bind an OG Immorta and you have an OG Immorta, a Gabwellius, and a Religio in your bind zone. Well, you can call Religio, OG Immorta, or Gabwellius because any of them are in your bind zone. So you get to call a copy of it up from deck and shuffle. So cool there. So same cost, but a better version of the ability. And then Divine Skill, Auto Vanguard. At the end of battle, she attacked anything. If your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater, choose a grade 3 or greater card with Leo and his card from your soul or from your drop zone. So if your Persona of that turn, just ride from soul. You may ride it as stand hand, and if you roll this unit, drag becomes 1 for the turn. You can pull that off again on your first grade 3 turn if your opponent wins first, so you can bully them down with extra attacks right there. That's actually what Erica did to guarantee that she survived against Ruka, using Leo Morta's skill to send back units from the bind zone. Not to mention the fact as well that she can ride either Leo and not specifically the same copy of herself, unlike a Morta. So if your only option is to actually superior ride into a Morta, even though it is a downgrade, if it's the only way to possibly kill your opponent that turn, or say for example you do have 2 Mortas in hand and you need to be able to guarantee you have 4 cards in bind zone to use both their skills, you can then superior ride that Morta to guarantee you have your PG active. All around, very solid grade 3 to have in the deck. She has consistent ability to increase her drive checks. She can superior call literally anything that's in your bind zone from your deck when she attacks for deck thinning and initialize multi-attack for all simple CB. Not to mention the fact as well that her divine skill is very versatile, and she can even superior ride from soul as well, so you don't have to waste time blasting her out with soul blasters like Sullivan, though we do have enough consistent soul blasters to get a copy of her into the drop zone before the divine skill even pops up in the first place. Very solid grade 3 to have in the deck. I love Leo Dragonis. This card is an amazing card in terms of artwork, but also in terms of skills as well. So as much as I didn't really want a Leo evolution, I'm very happy that we got one in the form of this unit. And without further ado, this is it for this one. I hope all of you guys enjoyed. Honestly, this deck is very fun to play. This deck comes from the nation of Keter Sanctuary. I mean, you have plenty of different ways to build it. One way is to play the Keter pile. Please don't do that. Another way is to play, you know, the Nebula Knight version, where you pretty much use the Nebula Knight order to get some consistency. And I think you have more superior call targets in there too, if I remember correctly. But I prefer this version where it's basically focused on what Leo can do with what Leo's cards do best. Focus on getting the bind zone cards, hitting you with good consistent beat sticks, and searching. Sullivan is really good as long as you know how to not overextend your soul and abuse the crap out of that 10k beat stick. Like, she's amazing. So yeah, I definitely recommend that if you're curious about trying Leo out, try this deck. They released that they're going to release a master deck set for Leo Amorta sometime in February. Sucks that it won't come with Draconis, but still, it's a way to try out most of the Leo cards without Draconis. So without further ado, I'm going to this one here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord, follow Twitch. I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to snap your vanguards.